help me welcome John Sloss, the producer of the film.
After all these years, I think you can probably consider me a proxy for Rick Linklater. So imagine he's here.
That was the idea. Not only though, this is the second film that Rick does gets inspired by Skip Hollander, this Texas Monthly writer, so journalist, and he finds these incredible stories. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis?
Yeah. So the other article that Skip wrote that Rick made a movie based upon is Bernie, which is an extraordinary film in its own right. And hello.
You keep.
Did I turn it off?
Yes, you did.
Hello. I'll turn this one off. So this article, I think, first appeared in 2002. And Rick read it at the time and said, oh, well, Gary Johnson's an interesting guy. But there's no real narrative thrust there. There's no movie there that he thought of. During the pandemic, Glenn Powell called Rick up and said, have you read this article? And Rick said, of course I have. He said, well, I love this character. You think there's something we can do with it? And Rick said, well, I looked at it before and thought there really wasn't, because the article itself basically left off at the point that Gary meets, what's it?
Her.
Madison, thank you, God. Madison Figueroa. And so everything that happens after that point was basically creative for narrative purposes. That never happened to Gary Johnson in real life, at least that we know of. And they sat and they wrote during the pandemic, and this is what they came up with. And the script was fall down funny. It was one of the best. You know, Rick's interesting. His scripts don't always sort of deliver on the page before his process starts. I remember the first time I read Before Sunrise, it was like there were these leaden excerpts from Thomas Mann, you know, and I'm like, but then he rehearses much like Mike Leigh does for 6 weeks, 8 weeks with his actors, and they create the final version of the script. This script, when I first read it, was basically what you see up here, and I don't know whether that was Glenn's involvement because Glenn's a co-writer on it. And it was set in Houston, and unfortunately, Texas is very backward in terms of film subsidy. So we had to move it to New Orleans. But considering the story, it actually seemed pretty well suited to New Orleans.
But Texas is very important for Rick. You know, he's made film. He's made all kind of genre film. You know, he's covered all the genres, small, big, and everything. But Texas, he has always this quality. It's almost like a regional filmmaker with an international quality. It's a really unusual blend.
I mean, when he really emerged, I've been working with him since Slacker, which is why I say I've sort of got the shtick down. I mean, he's an extraordinary storyteller. There aren't very many people like him on earth, but there are really a number of sort of regional moguls in this country who have sort of film industries, whether it was Chris Smith in Milwaukee or Victor Nunez in Northern Florida and things like that. I mean, Rick, I think, had very fertile. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, but he had a lot of fertile subjects and people in Austin, which is a real artistic, I would say, destination anyway. But he's very committed to that region. I mean, he started the Austin Film Society. They own a movie theater there. He's very rooted, and I would say, I talk to him about this all the time. He would have had a very different career if he had moved to Los Angeles, after Slacker or after Dazed and Confused. And he's stubbornly and somewhat defiantly stayed in Austin. And I think that really has informed a lot of his storytelling.
What do you think because obviously, that's where he comes from, but what do you think if there is an affinity of the spirit with that culture? How would you describe it?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's a hangout culture, and he takes his time um, telling his stories. Yeah, and um, and there's a cadence to life, I think, around, down there that maybe has accelerated a little bit in recent years. But that I think if you go home and watch Slacker again, you understand a lot about Rick, and so much of what he's done about the sort of homespun philosophizing and the sort of hangout quality of all his movies has been evident from the beginning with him. And I mean, the masterful thing about him is that if you look at if you look at all his movies, they're typically there's more narrative and plot in this film than just about anything he's done. I mean, he can take people walking around in Vienna for 2 hours and make it interesting. And there are very, very, very few filmmakers on earth who can do that.
There is also a lightness to Rick's films that is very deceiving, because this film is plot, it's like it's comedy, it's fun, everybody loves it because of its the physical comedy, the intrigue, but there is a substance to it, and that is just a little bit beyond just philosophizing in the way that Slacker is. It's a film about identity, and it's about the way you can change yourself, so he always throws this provocative
Well, I mean,
things
look at
outside.
philosophizing. Say what you will, but there's often substance behind it, and he's an extremely thoughtful guy, and he has stuff he thinks about and spends time thinking about that he finds a way to make entertaining, but also substantive at the same time. It's funny if you see the other. I'm not to malign Glenn Powell's other work, but if you see Anyone But You, and you look at the performance of that film, and you sort of look at the sort of substance of it and how deep it is and what else is going on behind, besides just the flirtation. Um, it's kind of lacking, and when you take a film like this and you overlay this whole theme about identity, I think it's very unusual for commercial films to sort of delve into things like that.
Do you think that's part of the power of the film? The film has been, this is a full house on the second weekend, and we had a full house all week and the last weekend. You think the way that the audience is embracing the film is this combination of thoughtfulness and yet being masterfully done and fun and sort of
Yeah, I mean,
affirming.
if you talk to Rick, that you'll talk to him about anything related to his storytelling. The first thing he'll tell you is, "I make comedies. That's what I do." So entertaining people is always a priority for him, and I think the idea of leading with that, which I think he does here, but layering in this kind of thoughtfulness is, I mean, to me, it's a recipe for commercial storytelling. So I, it's it's an interesting. We sold this film to Netflix, which is an interesting choice, and uh, it's a bit of a source of frustration, because. And I don't know if I can get into. Is it okay if I get into this? We Giulia, who is brilliant, first of all, works with the Venice Film Festival. Yes, there we go. Uh, and we showed her the film early on, and you said everyone on the committee just loved it, right? They were laughing,
away, yeah.
right away. So it obviously translated internationally, I would say,
Yeah.
because that's the makeup of that committee is mostly
Yeah, it's only Italians.
only Italian. Yeah, um, and uh, and at the time we were thinking, oh, we'd like to play Telluride, which is just really coincident with Venice, but really, yeah, it's coincident with Venice. Although Venice requires a world premiere, so you kind of bend yourself into a pretzel playing Venice and then trying to get to Telluride, leaving town immediately. And Giulia made the case that we should skip Telluride and play on Tuesday after the first weekend of Venice, which is typically seen to be death, actually, in festivals. Festivals, for all intents and purposes, are over after about 4 days.
That's Such a
So not true.
preconceived notion.
Well, anyway, these are opposing perspectives. And we were pretty grumpy about it and thought like, oh, we're being set up here, and they're not prioritizing our film, and they don't think it's a very good film, um, and Giulia and Alberto, her colleague, basically said, no, there's so many serious films at Venice this year that by the time you play on Tuesday, it'll be like piping pure oxygen into the theater. They will be so relieved to have something thoughtful but fun. I'm like, oh, that sounds like I'm being spun. And what happened is that so the morning of Tuesday was the press screening. That was the first time it was shown, and it became the sort of stuff of legend because press screenings at these festivals are painful affairs. People walk in and out. It's all these world weary journalists who've seen every film in the world and are just not the audience you want. And there was spontaneous applause at the press screening, and that never ever happens. And we premiered that night, and it was just a moment. It was just and we'll remember it the rest of our lives.
The film did not have a distributor, so that was really the first time that was out.
Yeah, we were taking it basically to sell. And then we went to Toronto with it because by Tuesday, here's the flip side. A lot of the buyers have left Venice because they think like I do, not like Giulia. And so we took it to Toronto, which is another sort of market commercial film festival, and happens the week after Venice. And that is where we showed it to all the buyers, and we showed it to all the buyers, all the theatrical buyers, all the streamers. Everyone was in the theater watching it. And afterward, we do what one does when you're selling a film. You sort of wring your hands and sit there and wait for the phone to ring, but act like everyone in the world's calling you, and whatever the manipulation is. That's a trade secret. And certain people called, but a lot of the theatrical distributors did not. Sony, the studio that had Glenn's movie that was going to come out next, Anyone But You, had already seen a rough cut of that movie. So they sort of knew, to the extent you think he's a movie star, that he was going to be a movie star. And they didn't make an offer. And really Focus and Searchlight didn't make an offer. And Netflix just went they freaked out for it. And in a way that wasn't just like, this is product. They actually had genuine enthusiasm. And we had some theatrical offers. And I said to Rick, I said, what is the delta? And Rick's very committed to the theatrical experience. Like I said, he owns a movie theater, or his Austin Film Society owns a movie theater in Austin. I said, what is the delta between what a theatrical distributor will pay us and what Netflix will pay us that will make you feel comfortable with going with Netflix? And he gave me a number, and I went to Netflix and said, okay, if you pay this amount, we will sell you the film. And they basically said, done, we'll do it. So that's where we are. Well, but it's kind of bittersweet because I think this film probably would have grossed a lot of money if it was released in a traditional theatrical way, and that would have been good.
One other thing well, first of all, let's go back. Since you've been with him from the very beginning, why you have long-standing relationship with Todd Haynes, with other filmmakers, but Rick is the one that is forever. Why?
Well, first of all, he's an insanely nice guy. He's a total sweetheart, and to me, he's a genius. When he sent me a mixtape after Slacker and said, "I want to make a movie. This is my movie," and it turned out to be Dazed and Confused. And then I had been approached by Castle Rock, which was this company that owned Seinfeld, and so all the partners had like $1 billion, and they wanted to get into the independent film business. And at the time, I worked with John Sayles, and I worked with Whit Stillman, who I still do, and I worked with Rick, and I brought them all in there, and they were like, "Yeah, these films cost 3 or 4 million. That's a rounding error for us. We'll do it, and we'll make whatever deal you want. And so we made Before Sunrise there. And it was just, I don't know. He and I hit it off. And there are a lot of filmmakers, there are different approaches to storytelling. There's some that are really completely visual and they use cinematic tricks. There are others that I think are really soulful and really about character. And I think Rick is one of the greatest practitioners of that approach. And that's an approach as an auteurist approach, which is the way I was sort of schooled in filmmaking anyway, that speaks to me more than any other approach. I mean, yes, would I work with Quentin Tarantino? Yes, I would. But to me, the type of storytelling Rick does is the most meaningful to me. And it just happened to coincide with someone who I like personally tremendously. So it's a happy coincidence.
If you have a question, I can go on forever, but if you have a question, raise your hand. Here, there's one. Hold on. Hold on, she's going to bring you a mic.
Love the movie, by the way.
Thank
very
you.
much. The movie's going to be in theaters for 3 weeks. Is that right? Before
the movie will be in theaters as long as people come to see it. It will be on Netflix June 7th. But many of the films that they have in theaters stay after it becomes available on Netflix. So
that's a good thing.
Yes. So tell 100,000 of your closest friends.
We had booked it until the 6th, and then we are extending it because people are really embracing it. So why not?
Bless you.
There's one right there. Hold on.
Why did he never do like
Hold on.
Why has he never done like a big budget movie or something, like just at least once to kind of, maybe satisfy some of
Well, he did School of Rock, which was not a small budget movie. I have to take partial responsibility for that because he likes to control his storytelling, and there are certain sacrifices you have to make to do that. And through the various financing mechanisms we've put together, we've enable him to control the productions and to keep creative control. And I think that's his preference. Would he ever go direct a Marvel movie or something like that? It would be very interesting to see that movie. I think there'd be a lot of talking. There's a movie we're going to do next that's going to be pretty big budget, and hopefully, my hope is that this film scores or whatever it is on Netflix enough so that it's seen as a commercial success.
You mean this one?
This one.
Yeah, not the next one.
No, so that I can then go, because we have two films. We have a film in the can. We shot a film in Paris this spring, and we're shooting another one in Dublin in July. And what I said to him after this film played at Toronto, I said, look, this film's going to be a commercial hit. Everyone in the industry knows it's a commercial hit. You've had your peaks and valleys. This is a peak. What are the films you want to make? And he told me there's two films about the life of an artist that are not inherently commercial. And he said, these are the two I want to make. I said, great, I'm going to go out and put the financing together for both of them. If there's one left in us, he's developing a project with Ethan Hawke and a bunch of other people about the Transcendentalists. I don't know how much you know about them, but Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau and this amazing period in American history. Margaret Fuller. Yes, there's a very famous actress who's going to play Margaret Fuller.
A lot of talking in the film.
There's going to be a lot of talking, not a big body count, not a lot of sex. That's why it's going to be a challenge to raise that much money for it. But it's going to have a killer cast.
What's the question?
So if any of you are billionaires and you would like to support a film which will be very entertaining in its own way, although not action-packed, about really one of the greatest moments in American history that's never been really covered, then this is it.
I can't believe you came here to pitch your movie.
You can't believe that?
No, I can't.
You can totally believe that.
question. I have a question about one of the talent, and you hit on it before. You hinted on it before at the beginning, when you were talking about the way Rick rehearses with his actors, and I think he's been discovering actors when Glenn Powell. He discovered Matthew McConaughey. I mean, he finds them, and then they become this huge movie star. Can you talk a little bit about his relationship with actors and his talent in finding them?
I mean, he has a brilliant sense of who can work as an actor for a certain story, and but he's also really lucky. I mean, the Matthew thing was amazing. Matthew was a student at the University of Texas who was having a drink at the bar at the Four Seasons in Austin, and literally the part that he plays in Dazed and Confused was a half-page part. Believe it or not, I was going to play it. I swear to God, I was younger then, and Matthew just walked over, and he had seen Slacker or something, introduced himself. He was a history major or something, and Rick just saw something in him and said, "Do you want to come in and read?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." And he came in, he got the part, and the second he showed up on set, it was like the stuff of myth. Like all the actors just started forming around him and following him, and his part just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Rick was smart enough to go with it. So that was pretty lucky. Glenn was in Fast Food Nation. I don't know if you know that.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, he had a very tiny part in Fast Food Nation, and Glenn is like, if you ever meet Glenn Powell, I mean, Glenn is like Tom Cruise in a way. He is determined to be a major movie star. And he's a very well-adjusted kid with a great family, but he is driven. And he basically, when we did Everybody Wants Some, which was Rick's baseball movie, which is a really good movie, but not well considered, I would argue, in his canon.
Well, it hasn't been seen much.
Yeah. And Glenn came in and he goes, "Wow, this kid grew up," because he had been there as like a 14-year-old in Fast Food Nation. And he got the part. And I mean, if you would have picked who was going to be the movie star out of that movie, I don't think you would have picked Glenn Powell. So but Ben Affleck got his start in Dazed and Confused. I mean, Rick's really had a remarkable hit rate. But I also think, he just writes parts that actors love and really find something to do with. So I think it really serves them as well.
What can you tell us about there's a hand there? Oh yeah, please. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Hi. Early in my career, I was a public radio journalist, and my very, very first public radio interview ever was with Rick Linklater at the Four Seasons Hotel on the day that the Newton Boys opened. But that's another story for a different day. But he told me this remarkable story about how he taught himself to be a filmmaker, how he was working on an oil rig 2 months on, 3 months off, or the other way around. And at that time, it was right before he made his short, which was You Can't Learn to Plow by Reading a Book.
Unfortunately, it's not a short.
Oh, it's not?
It is an interminable feature.
But he you know this story, right? How he taught himself to be he had these books on the shelf and he'd made these shorts. One was
he's a remarkable autodidact, and I know he made a lot of shorts. But yeah, he also watched, it's funny. I work with a lot of people at my company, and to me, Rick is a sort of role model because he watched 2,000 movies, and he watched 1,000 of them before he made his first feature. Right. So,
and just the other thing that he said was, at that time, it's a long time ago, but he had such great humility and grace, and he said that he knew that filmmaking was not his birthright, and every film that he made, he was afraid it might be his last, and so he carried that with him with everything that he's made. I haven't seen him since that time, but I assume perhaps he's still feeling the same way.
That's very true to who he is. Unfortunately, that's the way most filmmakers feel, and with good reason. It's it is really hard to make movies, and it is even harder to get them financed. So I can speak to that. But yeah, he's a humble guy. And, we just made a movie this spring in Paris in French, and he doesn't speak a word of French, in black and white, and it's going to be spectacular. And he said it was basically the best time he's ever had making a movie. And you just have to thank thank your lucky stars every chance you get to go out and do something like that. And he has that in spades.
There's a question there.
It seems like a lot of themes throughout his movie, I especially like Before Sunrise and Boyhood, and I feel like in most of what I see has to do with spontaneity, living in the moment, kind of this idea of presence, and this reference to him working with actors and changing the script for 6 to 8 weeks. After that fact, while making the actual movie, how much kind of changes on the spot? How much does he embody that as a director?
This is a big bugaboo for him because a lot of people say, the improvisational quality of your films is amazing, and nothing is improvised on his movies. And he's really rigorous about the script once they start shooting. So he is open to ideas from everywhere, and he's one of the most generous filmmakers I've ever seen in that respect. But once the script is locked, it is the script. And that is really an essential part of his storytelling.
But he's right when he talks about the present, this idea that it's in that moment. His films communicate that spontaneity, although it's built, right?
I mean, time is a very important
component
to his storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a theme that he goes through over and over again. But yes, in terms of being in the present and being self-aware and understanding, life as you live it, yes, that's a preoccupation of his.
What can you tell tell us about his interminable film, the one that the one that he started?
Had you seen You Can't Learn to Plow from Reading Books? Right. Yeah. I've only watched it once. It's available. I think if you go to the Criterion Collection or Criterion Channel, you might be able to see it. It's a lot of him on a train. Not a lot happens. But it's less entertaining than most of his stuff. He'd probably kill me for saying that.
It's one question here.
When you sell a movie to Netflix, is it sort of baked in the pie that they're not going to spend a lot of money on the theatrical run?
I mean, it's a fair question because they're a closed set, right? I mean, they spend money. Like if you go to, I was in Los Angeles this week, and there are these billboards all over Los Angeles, which are extremely clever. They're Glenn Powell in his various different forms, but as a sort of personal injury lawyer. It's like, you want someone killed, call so-and-so. And they're pretty clever, and they do that to promote themselves. But you're right, they don't have to do TV advertising because they just put it on your homepage on Netflix. And there's an argument that enables them to spend more money acquiring. But also there's no chance of a back end with Netflix. What they do is they buy you out. So they paid on this film twice as much as anyone else would pay. And everyone involved with it is going to profit handsomely from it. And it kind of, unfortunately, Netflix has been, although they've done these data dumps recently, I don't know if you've seen them, but they just did their second one where they list everything that's on Netflix and how many hours it's been watched. And if you understand really how to analyze that, it can be useful, although it's a bit overwhelming. But you don't really get a sense of when something's successful and when it's not on Netflix. And from a filmmaker standpoint, that can be extremely frustrating. And from a person who puts financing together for filmmakers, that can be extremely frustrating as well.
Last one. Yes, you do.
Make it good. Make it good.
So this film was obviously going to be a commercial success. Sorry, I lost my voice. So why didn't the studios pick up on it? Okay, where was
I
focus?
mean, do you guys think this would be a commercial success if it was
Yeah.
really?
It is at the Sag Harbor Cinema,
Hey. So
which is a thermometer.
magnify that by 2,000 and yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I do not. It was before anyone but you came out, and there was a question of whether Glenn Powell would be a movie star. He had done Top Gun, which was a supporting part, and but we all knew what it was. You knew what it was. We saw how it played, and I called all of these distributors and basically said, "What's going on? Why are you not making me an offer for this film?" And they're like, one of them said to me, "This is classic." He said, "Well, we can't buy everything we love."
Oh, I want to know what that is.
I'm like, what do you do with that? I mean, right? Yeah, it's gonna haunt me for the rest of my life.
I have a last question. I'm taking the last one. Before you arrived, I described you as one of the most important New York independent.
There are other more important New York independent.
Well, I was just trying to be fair. Fair. The most important. No, but you've been in one of the protagonists of the New York independent cinema for a long time. Has it getting harder, easier? What have the platforms added something?
I mean, this is a fun fact. If you aggregated the content budget of all of the streamers, the platforms, and the studios for 2024, what they spend making or buying content, if you had to guess how much that was, what would you say? Anyone? Over 100 billion. That is a fact.
Including
So-
series or including
Yeah, including all
series
content. Yeah,
okay.
but still, I mean, there's nowhere near good enough content to justify that price. So by that measure, things have never been more bountiful. The platforms, the streamers are not in the business of discovering talent, which is why Sundance, which is the best market for discovering new voices, has been hurting for so long in terms of scripted storytelling. We do a lot of work in documentaries because documentaries are not necessarily about discovery, and they're not about movie. So the platforms buy those, and that market's been very vibrant. But it's really hard for an up-and-coming storyteller to break through these days. And since the pandemic, and since people haven't fully returned to theaters, the notion of the smaller theatrical distributors really taking a chance on a new voice hasn't fully come back. So it's the best of times and the worst of times, I would say.
Seems like a thoughtful place to end the conversation. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for sticking around.